Okay, hi everyone. We're here in my apartment on Jasper Ave, and I'm going to take you on a quick walk just outside my apartment, where we're going to talk about my little project that I've been doing for this undergrad research award. So I'm going to put you in my pocket. We'll get started. And I'm going to walk up really quick. So, for those of you who might be unfamiliar with Dr. Donald's work, Dr. Donald is in the Faculty of Education and working particularly with the intersection of educational curriculum and Indigenous wisdom. And in particular, his project, the one that I was working on, is one where he creates walking together stories vodcast videos. And these videos are of him and colleagues walking together in the places that mean the most to them. The river valley in Edmonton is featured quite frequently, but oh shoot, oh no, you can see we're good. I thought you'd fallen deeper into my pocket than I was expecting. And sorry, I lost my train of thought. And then on top of that, he walks. Just turn this light on. Not get hit by cars. He walks in the river valley as a way, I think, to communicate a very important methodology, very important principle. And I think, while I don't have necessarily a gigantic academic background, this is an undergraduate award, I'm an undergraduate student, I think in part to show my gratitude for being a part of this project and admiration for the work that's being done. I maybe wanted to demonstrate the effectiveness of a walking stories vodcast in undergraduate research. So I don't expect my words to have the same gravity as Dr. Donald when it comes to Indigenous wisdom and when it comes to bridging Indigenous wisdom with teacher education. But I do expect, I think, to at least demonstrate how, your average undergraduate student can benefit from this kind of activity when it comes to these bigger, I guess, research award presentations. And I guess to start, one of the quotes that I've gleaned from my education is the Marshall McLuhan quote that the medium is the message. And it's so cliche to hear this these days because media controls, I think, in large part, well, maybe I'll rephrase that. I just think that we are very concerned, I think, right now with the thing that appears on a screen in front of us. And we become, I think, fixated on things like news. And as teachers, as I've entered the classroom, I've recognized how impacted students are by the media that they consume. So the way that a message is sent is extremely important. How we consume our media, or what the thing that mediates messages, in large part dictates what the message is. And I really hope that, if I can be quite sincere, I'm really hoping that as you watch me walk in the river valley, you see that, I might say a few words here and there, But really, my message is just the thing you're seeing walking in the river valley. And as simple as that is, I think it has quite a large significance with teacher education. And here's the significance. So when I was talking with Dr. Donald, about this project, he invited me to think deeply about what was sacred to me. And I think in my own life, things that are sacred are in large part connected with religious things, things that I think, in my friend groups, if I'm trying to be cool, have gone out of vogue. And so I think in really heeding that instruction to build a connection with the sacred, I think I've had to reconnect with the word sacred. What are sacred things for me? Can they exist in my own context as a beginning teacher? Even if my relationship with existing, religions or might be complex, and I think maybe here are my thoughts on that. And I think my thoughts come from the interviews, or are inspired. Hey, buddy. Are inspired by the interviews that Dr. Donald has done in his Walking Stories vodcast. The primary thing, I think, is that when you're walking in the river valley or you're walking outside, you begin a journey. You're moving from one location to another. And in a lot of ways, the land becomes a bit of a teacher. You get to see things on your way from point A to point B. I'm walking right beside the river. It's flowing at about the same pace that I'm walking. And I think as I connect just a little bit with that river and the environment around me, I begin to realize that actually I'm part of it. That I'm not just some kid doing an undergraduate project, but actually I'm a part of this larger ecosystem, and that to some degree these things feed me so that I continue to work on my undergraduate projects. And on top of that, they feed everyone else. And I don't wake up in the morning and fetch water. So I don't have that direct connection with the land that I think might have existed historically, but still, that's where my water comes from. And just beginning my walk outside, I think, captures a bit of that relationship. What I'm doing, though it might feel like rambling, it might be rambling, but I'm trying to draw, I think, maybe the objective of my walk here, which is to underline how there's a bit of a disconnect when it comes to modern life or the colonial modernity that we live in, and the environment and the sacred. My redefinition of the sacred, at least in this case, and for me personally, and I'm not trying necessarily to tell everyone that this is absolutely true. I think this is just something that I'm turning over in my head and hoping that it's true. the real sacred thing about life, I think for me, is to understand that I actually am part of an environment, that I don't have to set myself apart. I don't have to preserve myself for intellectual things in order to feel sacred or pure. But actually that setting apart, that sacrosanct project of removing the intellect from the world, is actually the very thing that creates relationship denial, is the thing that ends up being the colonial power itself. And well, I shouldn't say the colonial power, but certainly the knowledge structure of that power. And oh boy, I might be out of my depth here, but I really, I think, appreciate some of the conversations that have gone on in the vodcast, because I think a lot of them recognize that the education system perpetuates this colonial power. And I guess when I say colonial power, it's removing people from their environment, removing the intellect from things like the spiritual, the emotional, the mental, or sorry, the physical, and treating the intellect alone as sacred. Now, I did do research. This is, an academic walk, and I think diving into the sacred a little bit, I'd recognize that part of this colonial power has changed over time. Part of the definition of the sacred that I would use to define this colonial, sacredness, and I'm not saying that this is my definition of sacred, but what I think colonialism has deemed sacred comes from Emile Durkheim, where in his separation of the sacred and profane, he announces that which is sacred is not necessarily the thing that is God, but just the thing that is set apart. And I guess it comes from the idea that in order to have an encounter with God, you have to be separate from society. But I think Durkheim argues, just as God is sacred, also the devil is sacred, or at least the thing that we set apart as being beyond mundane. The thing that is not what we would call profane, the everyday things, is the sacred. And so if we take that definition, we can think of how we have been using that as a way, I think, to construct our society, that humanity is sacred, and therefore it must be set apart from the world. Though we exist inside of the earth, or on the earth, our heads are outside of it. The world, I think, or the land, has been deemed profane. And so to counter that, we build these concrete caves, and we allow our screens to take our minds into this unknown realm. And then we completely forget that we rely on the earth. And I really hope that at least it comes across here, that this has a huge impact on me as a teacher. because every day I wake up, this is my first month teaching at Louis St. Laurent Junior High School. And every day I wake up in the morning, and when I wake up, I drive in a car and listen to the radio, and or listen to music on my phone, and then arrive at school and walk into a classroom and put on a projector in that classroom, and then use that projector to transport my students directly to the messages of my content. And those messages are meant to isolate the concepts that I am teaching, and to hopefully bring them directly to the minds of the students in such a low impact way that they will then be able to learn it as quickly as possible. And then when I test them, they can recite it back to me. And though, of course, this is just one kind of example of pedagogy, there's still, I think, the notion of thick classroom walls that, kind of like a cage, remove students and teachers alike from the outside world. And I think this is dangerous. And I think the reason this is dangerous is because it follows this idea of colonial sacredness, which is to remove you from the world which has been deemed profane. Now, certainly I think there are new movements today that are interested in bringing Indigenous knowledge back into classrooms. I think what I would point out here, and this might come, I think, both out of naivety or out of hope. Certainly I don't think a lot of professors with deep research backgrounds would say something like this, because obviously it's maybe an overwhelming or impossible idea. But I think the problem has to do with the classroom. The problem that exists with teacher education today is that students have to go to class and sit. It's essentially the mediation of relationship denial. Going back earlier, the media is the message. The classroom mediates this colonial logic, this colonial sacredness, that students must be separate from the world in order to take in sacred intellect, that thing that will send them off. And I think if we're not careful, students are going to think that the only valuable thing for them to be is smart. And of course, in the university, that's the same problem. So I think in saying all of that, and in risking this sort of project as being way too rambly and unfocused, to let you in on the real workings of my mind here. That's very vulnerable of me to do. I really hope to just get across why Dr. Donald's project is important. What he's doing is he's not redefining, reintroducing what the sacred is, and doing so in a way that's approachable. What I mean by that is that, sure, you've been able to maybe build a relationship with technology in your classroom. Sure, you've been able to get your students' attention by playing, Blook-It games, where the students have their content gamified in front of them, and things can move quite quickly on the screen. But at the end of the day, the students put those Chromebooks down and then move to their next class, and then move to their next class, and then move to their next class for the remainder of their young lives, and might not build a relationship with the ground that they're standing on and with the sky above them, might not build a relationship with a life-giving system. And if they don't necessarily build that relationship, then how are they going to be accountable for protecting those things? If they have nothing to do with the world, how are they going to learn to save it? How are they going to recognize and build the awareness that they don't just exist in their heads, that there are things around them that rely on them and need them, and that they are just one part of this great network? I think if we look at how classrooms are headed, classrooms currently, and I'm just a brand new teacher, but this is what I see, are competing with the media systems that are created to demand attention. And students seem to have lower attention spans and higher demands because of this system. That's speculation. But at the end of the day, I think that the step to be taken is not to try and compete with media. It's not to TikTokify your teaching, but actually it's to do the opposite. It's to reconnect students with the natural movement of the earth, which is not sped up just to appease a short attention span. It's to teach them that they have a relationship not only with their families and their friends, but also the very things that exist to support them in this world. And maybe to finish things up here, because I've probably taken too much of your time already just talking. The Walking Stories vodcast is, I think, a way of challenging the motion of speed teaching to appease media-hungry students. It's a way to teach students that as they walk from point A to point B on their journey in life, that along the way the earth will teach them things, that they will recognize that they are part of something else, and along the way they'll be able to, through observation, through feeling, learn that the sacred thing in their life exists and that it gives them purpose and meaning. Yeah. So I'm nearing my stop. This is the walking Aiden Oswald signing up. See you later.